Hey everyone, Irit Ezips here for CSM Practice, and welcome to my podcast where we focus on customer success strategies. How can you scale your company, best practices, and things to really think about so that you can do your thing right and get to customer retention, expansions, advocacy, and really get to scale your company in a profitable manner. And I have a very special guest here today from Israel. Her name is Hili Kreisler, and she's the VP of Customer Success at a company called Checkmarks. So Hili, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about what you do and what do you want to talk about today?
So I'm the VP of Global Customer Success at Checkmarks, and I want to talk today about scaling customer success.
This is such an important topic because anytime somebody says we need to scale, they're thinking about cutting costs, maybe using technology more, decreasing the level of touch points with customers. They don't really think about it in a very strategic manner, in my humble opinion. And I think that you come up with such an interesting framework to think about how do you scale your company, leveraging customer success based on the company life cycle, as well as the different tools you have to your availability. So maybe let's start from the beginning. When I'm a young startup and I think about customer success, what does it really mean, in your opinion, in your experience? How does that translate for the company at a very, very young startup, just a few customers in maybe round A?
For a young startup, everybody should be customer success. I don't think you should have a customer success function per se. If you're a young startup, every new customer is everything for you. And the CEO and CPO and everyone should know everything about the customer. So really, customer success is a proper function, the way we know it today, doesn't make sense because everybody know the customers and they will treat any request with invest a lot of time to make it happen and to make the customer a success.
In other words, when you're a very young startup, forget about scalability. If you just have a handful of customers, everyone should be in customer success. Everyone should have the customer at the front line because they're really just doing a proof of value at that moment, like really understanding what is the value prop of their company, what works, what doesn't, what's the addressable market. And so you can't really think too hard about scalability versus just nailing the customer centricity and understanding what is your business value, what is your business proposition, so that you can grow and get additional investment.
Correct. And actually, the real test for you as a company and for your product would be when you start to scale. So you reach to a point where you grow, sometimes very fast even. Then what will come to a test will be your product. Is it scalable? And your ability to drive customers to success with your product or the solution that you sell. And then this is the time you need to think about customer success. Even then, not necessarily at scale the way we see that in bigger organizations. Because even then, you have a few customer success team members, and probably, unless there's a long tail of many, many customers, they will again be a proper account manager with high touch engagement of customers. And only the next phase, when you start really growing and cannot throw more people at the problem, you need to start really thinking about doing that in a scalable way, in a way that not every few customers means additional team members to make it work.
All right. So you're talking about how we can potentially approach scalability in different phases of a company's life cycle. So I just wanted to double click on, how do you feel about if a CEO does feel like, okay, I'm a small startup, round A, round B, I still want to introduce maybe some productivity instead of scalability. I think that's really the double click in that stage. Like you shouldn't not have any solutions available. You should probably invest in some technology, but I think the emphasis is more on productivity rather than scalability. Would you agree with that? That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, I definitely agree that productivity is where you need to start thinking at that stage, how to make it work. And I think maybe really the most important point is to always think about that in a strategic way. Think about the post-sale journey the customer is going through. And I would start by thinking about that journey from high touch customer perspective. The most you want to give, the most it makes sense. And also it makes sense for the customer to consume. And think about that journey. So this is the maximum you would give for a very important customer, depending on the specific company. And then say, okay, that means that this is our most valued customer type of journey. And now take that journey and look at that and see, okay, what can I take off that journey and still make it work? And to which customers will it work? So translating that is building the journey and building the segmentation together with that. So segmenting your customers and thinking to which type of customer you will need which type of engagement. And even by only doing that, which is basically a very strategic exercise, you will become a lot more productive and a lot more efficient. And I will say that in many ways, your customers will appreciate that very much. Not all customers need their account manager or their CSM to talk to them every week or every 2 weeks.
So if you're a startup company approaching funding rounds B, C, D at the most, and you do have some large customers, I want to caveat that. You have some large customers, some enterprise clients, maybe some SMBs, but kind of like a mix types of companies that you work with. The first thing you do is you create a segmentation. What are your most valued clients? And what are your smaller segments? What should fall into like a lower engagement level? Then start by designing what is the appropriate engagement level for the highest touch clients. And then think about how does that translate then for your lower segment. That's one way to start scaling. I really love that you started with that, because I think the one mistake that I see is that when new customer success executives or recently appointed customer success executives get the word, hey, you need to scale thrown in from the CEO, they're thinking, oh my gosh, I need to implement some digital experiences. What do you think about that?
Today, everybody talk about digital experience because that sounds like magic. You automate some processes, you put in maybe a mailing campaign or digital touch through the product, etc., and everything works. Well, if it was that easy, everybody would do that. To really implement through effective digital strategy takes time and a lot of trial and error, and actually also the right tech stack to make it work. Before you try, in my opinion and experience, before you go to that direction, I would start by planning the journey and the implementation and doing some automation in the backend, in the processes of the customer success team, trying that on them, and then moving to do that directly customer facing. For example, you track declining and usage trend of one of your customers. So you can do an automation that pings the CSM and tells them, you know what, you should connect with your customer. I see something's wrong here, okay? And they will set up a call with the customer, try to understand what's going on and how they can help him. That is the backend automation. On the alternative, you could simply send an email to the customer, but then it will be very hard to know, was it tracked on time? Did they even open the email? What did they get? You have to try so many things that it might take you so long that you will never know on time if that was the right one. So I think to do that digital touch type of process, because it takes so much time, I would start in a more modest way before I go to that direction. Although I know and I understand why everybody really try to go to a digital experience immediately, because that sounds so efficient.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I just wanted to recap. Digital experience can happen at any stage of the company's life cycle, and it really depends on the type of customers that you have. So I want to caveat, if you do have a mix of customers, one way to scale is to do the segmentation and define a customer journey with a right level of engagement based on how much value you're getting out of the client or potential value you can get out of the customer. However, at any stage of a company's life cycle, if you do think that the digital experience is more appropriate because of your business model, whether in your seed or enterprise company already, you kind of want to approach it in a more diligent manner. Start with back-end digitization and then gradually grow into a fully digitized journey. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Correct. And that actually will shorten the time, because then you'll try some stuff and you'll be in a more controlled environment. And then you say, oh, that means that this alert makes sense. It works. Every time I call the customer, I understand they're in a problem because of that alert. Then I can try to automate the next steps. If you do it immediately, you'll never know if it worked. I mean, if it worked, then perfect. If it didn't, and many times it doesn't, you will have to try many directions until you understand what really works and what's not.
Another point about digital experiences, Healy, is that you actually need different resources or people and skill sets than a CSM. And so depending on your life cycle as a company, it may or may not make sense, or you may or may not have the budget to invest in the right people to execute on a digital experience.
It's the budget for people and it's for the technology. It's a combination of both. But I do want to add here that question comes up a lot, and I have a very firm opinion on that. Does that work for any type of customer or only for the long tail of customers, this type of digital experience? And in my opinion, it works for every customer. Most customers would love to have self-paced experience that is right for them. It's not just for the low-touch segment or the small long-tail customers. For many customers these days would love to have a digital experience, but it has to be the right one. It's not something you achieve within a month. It takes time to really get to that point where you really define the right experience for the right type of customer.
And one would argue that when you're in round A, round B, you may not know who your ideal customer profile is. And even if you did, you may not know everything that they need and how do they prefer. What does best-in-class customer looks like, behaves like, needs are, use cases that they might implement. So sometimes moving towards a digital experience too quickly might not give you the human touch you need in order to learn all these things.
Exactly. Many times in that specific point in time in the lifetime of the company, you don't have that much time. You want to achieve results very fast and learn or fail very fast. And if it takes too long to really understand that, you might miss the time.
Yeah. I love how you're framing this. One, at the beginning, you can think about productivity around how you work with clients, but everybody is in customer success. Then the next phase of scaling your post-sales experience for your customers is potentially setting up a customer success organization and then setting up the right segmentations with various engagement models. I typically recommend no more than 2, even though there's like 5 different engagement models you could probably pick from. And then in parallel, you want to think about the user experience. And I think that, or a self-serve experience in parallel to a higher touch experience, because they do tend to infuse each other. So instead of thinking about, oh, I need to scale customer success, let me build this digital experience, rather think about how do you scale your higher touch? And then how do you also include a self-serve engagement so that you don't need to throw people at the problem so much. And that's one way of scaling it, but it should exist regardless because it also augments the experience itself.
I would say that actually to scale customer success and do it right, you cannot think about it as doing more with less. Okay, that will never work. What you need to think about is to optimize the process in a way that's best for your customers first and yourself. If you start thinking about, try to do more with less. Let's see if we can reduce touches and still make it work. Your customers will sense it in a second. Sometimes you have those restaurants or those musicians and artists or I don't know, fashion designers that you think about them and you say, well, I liked them so much better when they were small.
Yeah.
So this is what you need to avoid. You need to keep this like intimacy with your customers, even when growing. And doing that without giving them the feeling that you are only trying to be efficient. You're only trying to make it work with less people. It will work and you will grow and scale when you find this sweet spot where they get exactly what they need, exactly on time. And that will allow you to drive success for your customers, as well as doing that in a productive and efficient way.
Love that. Literally a drop the mic moment. When you think about you need to scale, don't think about cutting costs, doing more with less. It's not about you. It's about what does the client really need at the right time, having the appropriate experience to reach their desired outcomes. And if you focus on that, you won't give them too many people. You'll just give them enough resources to be successful at the right time. And then maybe step out of the way when they don't need so many handholdings. So let me ask you this. Have you ever heard of dynamic customer segmentation?
Yes, definitely. And it's actually very, very important to implement that. Otherwise, if you do that in a very defined structure, this one is a high touch, this one is a mid touch, and you don't take into account where they are specifically in that point in time and say, okay, now this customer needs more high touch. They will get it from me for the next few months. And maybe then when I understand that this process has matured enough, or this customer has matured enough, or they don't need me anymore, then I will reduce the level of engagement with the customer or add more digital experience to that customer. If you'll be super structured and never look right or left, you miss really the point of the fact that you are working with features or customers that have different needs throughout their life cycle.
I agree. I think that's such an important point in how you should be thinking about this versus focusing on internal things that are important for executives. If you think about the dynamic segmentation, I think it's a very hard thing to implement. Everybody says you should just shift the customer to the right engagement level as needed, but how do you know what they need? Who determines which should they get a high touch or a lower touch? Do you have some experience in how do you pull that off? For me, it's such an enigma. You literally need technology and data collection from multiple systems. And what's your take on this?
Let's think about that aha moment when you say, okay, I need to increase the engagement with this customer. So one obvious aha moment would be when you hear that your customer is in trouble at the moment. Not necessarily on fire, but in trouble. And sometimes they will ask you, I need you to help me more because currently I'm having some difficulties. Or sometimes you will get that from the data or from your discussion with them. And I don't think you need to be over sophisticated. You can simply give your team the ability to change that. Tell them, look, if your customer needs that, so maybe you should give it to them. Okay, give them the freedom to be more flexible with the customers when they need to, and not tell them, look, this one do not get that, no matter what. Okay, this is one point. The other way to think about it is to really be able to define where the customer is in their life cycle. So obviously, at the beginning, they'll probably need a lot more hand-holding than in the business as usual stage in their life cycle. They might be still the same size of customer with the same potential, so to speak, and they might be always good in their understanding of the solution, in the usage of the solution. But at the beginning, if you hold their hands more, you'll have easier time going forward. So then you can lower the engagement level with the customer and the attention that you give to them, and maybe give them more digital experience, but less human touch.
Yeah, I love that. So digital segmentation, yet another tool that customer success executives can implement instead of doing a fixed segmentation that is mainly based on logo value or contract value, and then allow the CSMs, even if it's a pooled CSM model, to shift the customer to a higher touch or a low touch. If it is a pooled model, and for those who don't know what a pooled model is, basically you don't have a designated account for each CSM, or rather you don't have a designated CSM for each account, but rather a team of CSMs dedicated to a pool of accounts. And then they essentially, based on data, based on trends, based on their conversations with the client, can then elevate and say, these are the 10 customers that I'm going to be working with in a higher touch engagement model, and the rest is just in time. And then you give them some discretion to say how many customers they're going to work with at a higher touch, or do they have any guidelines for that?
You need to trust your team members. You do not give them that freedom to really have a judgment call on the customers. I mean, this is why you send them to speak with the customers, because they can understand the customer and they can know what they need at the moment. Now, if immediately all the customers become high touch, it will not work. But if you give them the right guidance to say, okay, when that happens, then it's a good indication that probably they need more attention from you. And you have that freedom to decide So you give them the ownership and the responsibility and accountability to really make the decision based on what they are hearing from the customers. And I would say, trust your team members. That's first. And of course, as long as you can have supporting data points that can help you with that decision or actually trigger an alert saying this customer may need more help from us. Let's go check that out. And if it makes sense, let's increase the engagement for a few weeks or months until things calm down for this customer. So data points can be, again, usage trends, support cases, anything that can indicate where the customer is, what is their level of intensity they need from you. That will help you drive your team members to check that out in a more personal way.
Absolutely. So we're talking in general on how we can leverage different techniques and tools and strategies to scale our company, leveraging customer success. And then even within customer success, how can we use digital engagement? How can we use dynamic segmentation to then amplify the way that we work with clients and scale that and really focus on delivering the right experience at the right time versus doing more with less?
Exactly.
If somebody wanted to scale their customer success team, you've done it a million times before, you've been an executive in customer success for many years. What are the three things that they need to think about as they approach thinking about the strategy, and what should they be doing first? And are there any specific things that they should have in place, like certain technologies that they should definitely think about investing in order to be able to do that?
First, think about it strategically. Think about the journey and the segmentation. And the next thing I would do is actually think about if you need a tool for your post-sales processes. And why? That's because if you wait too long with that, you'll find that you may not have think about that, but your team members did. And they found numerous free tools that they use because otherwise they cannot manage their book of business. So then when you wake up and say, okay, I probably need customer success tool, you'll see that you have no single source of truth. Your team uses endless free either tools, and there's 10 team members and 20 answers to how the process should look like. So then again, sometimes you need to think about those things in advance, not necessarily take the most expensive and robust tool, but if you have one tool, at least everybody are doing the same process in the same way, and you have one source of truth for everything, and you have visibility. As I said, I think customer success is all about scale. And you need to think about scale when you're small, and of course when you are scaling, and even when you're scaling more. And that is part of that. Infrastructure is a very important thing for achieving that.
So one, think about strategy and what are your goals as a business or as a CS executive, what are you trying to accomplish? And then define the roadmap for that. Two is think about the infrastructure. What are the tools that you have, the processes you have defined, and try to get ahead of it so that you don't have a plethora of stuff you need to deal with later. Is there a third tip that you would recommend?
Third one would be to define the right playbooks. So the right playbooks for the team. Of course, use what you already have, but really define them in a way that when a new team member comes and he asks you how you do things here, you have a well-defined answers. Team members come and go, or you need to grow and add more people once you start growing. And if the playbook is not well-defined, and it's not easy, it's a very hard task, okay? Because there's so many playbooks that you need. When do you flag a customer to be at risk? Okay, for example, what's the answer for that? You'll ask 10 CSM, they'll give you 200 answers for this question. And if you don't have a very defined guidelines, or how do you assess the health of the customer? Forget about just flagging them. How do you know if this is a great customer? What is the indication? So any CS professional will tell you, of course, I know what's the indication, but the flavors will be endless. So if you don't have the right playbooks for that, you'll, as the same as the infrastructure, you'll get into trouble very fast.
So have a consistent way of doing things in very clear manner in which you define certain terminologies, playbooks, etc. So you have a cohesive way. And by the way, this cohesiveness is so important for scalability. If you think about it, it's kind of like, when you see a boat with 8 people rowing in it, if they're insynchronized, the boat is going to be very choppy and you're never going to be as fast as everybody rowing at the same time, at the same speed, doing the same movements. So I think some of it is kind of like works in business too, when everybody knows what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to be doing that, with some flexibility, of course. There's a way of doing business with your company. There's a way that we understand how organization works, and we can work with each other a lot better. And that in and of itself not only helps scale the business, but also allows for a better customer experience.
Exactly.
Well, awesome. Healy, I really enjoyed the conversation today. I think there's a lot of really good tips about how to think about scalability and especially what not to do. So I think that's going to be like the main topic for this session, is like what not to do when thinking about scaling customer success or scaling your business in general, especially when it comes to post-sale experiences. So Healy, thank you so much for attending today and sharing your experience and expertise with everyone. I think I got a lot of nuggets out of it, and hopefully many who are watching this video are starting to think about scalability a little bit different than they've done before.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I had a really good time.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to hit the notification button so that you can get notifications on anytime we have a new video. And with that, I want to say thank you so much, Healy, and I'll see you all at the next video.